I don't believe there's any such thing as losing or failing. I think you're either winning or you're learning.
She lost her brother to the invisible wounds of war, and that ended up igniting a mission to heal an entire nation. Today's guest on the show is training Christian women to rise up and reclaim the culture. Now, I know that you're listening for stories of success. That's why you're here. Thank you for showing up. Welcome back to the root of all success. I am the real Jason Duncan. This is episode number 344, and my guest today is Diane Canada. She's a national TV commentator. She's a podcast host. She's a speaker, and she's the author of the Lady Up America series of books that's coming out. We're going to talk a little bit about that. She's got her third book coming out this year. And Diane's journey has taken her from consulting boardrooms to syndicated television to the campaign trail. And all of that has been tied back to one thread, and that is the thread of healing. So after losing her brother to the mental scars of war in Afghanistan, she ended up running for Tennessee State House. She launched a national movement training Christian women for cultural leadership, and she's appeared on Newsmax, News Nation, Fox News, and her training workshops have ignited thousands of women across battleground states. Diane Canada, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jason. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. And you talk, Diane, about healing as the common thread in everything that you do. Companies, culture, even a broken system for veterans. What does healing actually look like in a nation as divided as ours today?
The only hope we have is Jesus Christ. It's the only hope we have. I mean, everything that ails us can be cured in our faith. That's what I've come to see. So healing looks like, us coming back to the core principles of what we were built on, and, that perfect governing structure of the nuclear family that God designed. Although I've not enjoyed that. I'm like the poster child for what happens when that falls apart. But when I look at my journey of all of the things that have just catered to the pain and the hurt in my life, it all comes back to, if we'd have just done it God's way to begin with, we could have saved ourselves all that. So I believe that's the answer. And I know that's a very broad thing, Jason, but I've filtered it down into my training program and all to get to the practical of how that looks on the ground. But it's the only hope we have.
Well, I happen to 100% agree with you on that. And I know that we don't really know one another, although we just are new friends today on the show and we live in the same town. So perhaps we'll get to know each other. But for the listeners to the root of all success, everybody who listens knows that at the end of my show, as sign off on all 344 episodes, I always say Jesus is King. At the very end, that's what I do to sign off. And it's not a throwaway line. It's truly important. And so what you're saying is echoing that sentiment. So you and I are in 100% agreement. But I don't often do this on this show, but I'm going to do something right here at the top for the listeners who enjoy this type of content. Because today we're going to talk a little bit more about how faith and the Christian values and all that. And that's not generally the topics we talk about on the root of all success. But for those of you who are listening today and like what we're going to talk about today, and you want to lean into that, I have another show that I host called Chisel and Compass. And I don't think I've ever talked about it on this show before. But since Diane is so open about her faith and how this is the healing that we need for America, go look at chiselandcompass.com. It's a show that we release, I don't know, once a month or so. And it's co-hosted by me and a good friend of mine, Dr. Justin Mosley. And we talk about the intersection of faith, business, and mindset. And I only throw that in there because of the way Diane opened the show. So if you're a listener of this show and you like that type of thing, we don't do this a lot on this show. So if you like this sort of thing, there's a whole other show that you might look at. Now, Diane, forgive me for doing that little
not at all.
Shameless plug there. Now, your brother served in Afghanistan, and he came home carrying some what I think you refer to as invisible wounds, and these invisible wounds ultimately ended up taking his life. How did that loss reshape everything you thought you knew about purpose?
That's a great question. I don't think I really had purpose until that tragedy happened, not deep-rooted purpose. I had goals. Jason, I was one of these people like in the early 90s and in the 2000s when I was climbing, in my business climbing my business ladder, I had like the Post-it wallpaper all over my office. I was all into the Zig Ziglars and the Tony Robbins. And I mean, I was just on a steady diet of all of that stuff. And so one of the things I would notice though is none of that ever really stuck when I would really find the chips down. Like it would push me, it would get me through some tough days maybe. But I mean, when the bottom drops out, like losing your brother, in that way, that just changed everything for me. All of a sudden, when we started to recover from that, and I was about 5 years into, well, maybe about 4 years after he passed, when I started really feeling God tugging on my heart for public service. And I had never, ever, ever had politics on my radar, like not ever, the furthest thing from my mind. But when God's calling you, when he starts to put up those road signs and point you towards something, and he gets louder and louder, the more you resist him, the more you start to lean in and go, okay, Lord, what are you trying to tell me? And I started really going into prayer about that and saying, are you really calling me to politics? So when I think to answer your question, when I've had some devastating things happen, but when that devastation happened, and it was so related to so many things going on in our culture, like when I saw how we were pulled out of Afghanistan, after my brother had served there, and the cost to our family for him serving there, these dots just started connecting for me. And I really, that's where I've really found purpose. I've never been more fulfilled in my work than I am now.
Well, before politics and before you got into media, you were a consultant and you were helping women-owned businesses in crisis. Mm-hmm. So what patterns did you see in those companies that made you realize that leadership itself needed to be redefined?
Yeah, I've had a lot of front row seats to a lot of entrepreneurs. In fact, I've been one too since the mid 90s. I had my own consulting firms and I had a staffing arm. And so I've sat with and held the hands of owners since the mid 90s to recent. I mean, I'm still doing it. I'm still helping candidates that are running for office, and that's very entrepreneurial in a lot of ways. So my whole career, I've been in leadership. And so I've seen all the trends. I've learned from the best of the best. I've had incredible mentors. And the common things that I see, and I've even taught entrepreneurship in the women's prison here, did that for 4 years. And so one of the things I would go in and say to them that is relevant here, I would say to them, I would never, ever attempt ever again to run a business without God right in the center of it. Because the decisions that we make, the crossroads that we come to in business, even the forecasts that we make in business, we don't have the perspective that God has, and I don't think we have the stability emotionally, mentally, all the things that come at you as an entrepreneur, all the things that you have to field and deal with and juggle. It is so challenging that I wouldn't attempt to do it without consulting God for everything. And how that relates now to the culture is really interesting. We'll get into more of that, I'm sure, but it's like it all goes hand in hand. I see that everything he's been training me for my whole life, those crossover skills, those transferable skills, they're universal. So we needed massive change in leadership, I think, from those older ways of doing it, like, hustle, go after your goal, make it happen, number one, all that, all that stuff that we were sort of fed. Now, the way that I lead now is so different. Now it's more of a follow the next breadcrumb, trust God, follow the Holy Spirit in all of your dealings especially when you're making tough decisions, and especially when you're deciding what you're going to do next, how your business is going to evolve.
Well, you hosted a syndicated TV show focused on songs that heal, and that was going out to 100 million households. So what did music teach you about reaching people that politics never could?
Oh, so much. Music. Oh my gosh. I've had this pendulum swing, almost like parallel careers between the entrepreneurial consulting side and then the professional songwriting side. And, it's one thing to sing, but when you're a writer, you're really having to dig deeper. Say it a different way. Say it in a way that's going to not make somebody hit the fast forward button, right? Or the seek button on the radio. And it teaches you that we all have universal feelings. We may have experiences in our life that different roads that we travel, but it all comes back to these universal feelings. So love and wanting to belong and wanting to feel accepted and wanting to feel successful and wanting to feel at peace. And I mean, all of these things, you could probably put them in a jar, right? Of these things that we all ultimately feel. But the roads and how we arrive at that are very, very different. So music was the expression of that for me. And when you have to go back and say, okay, there's like 10 million songs written about, let's just say, success, or 10 million songs written about love. How do you say it differently? How do you say it in a way that's new and fresh? That's really played a big role in helping me with messaging and helping me distinguish businesses from each other, distinguish candidates from each other, distinguish even messages that I want to send out, you know, podcasting, book writing, whatever it is. So saying a lot in a concise space, but making it count, making it have impact. And so music has been a beautiful complement. For years, I didn't understand what God was doing there. But now that I'm at this season in my life, I see how he has blended that perfectly. It's been a world-class education in messaging.
So your phrase "lady up," so we've all heard "man up," right? Man up, but you
Yeah.
said your phrase is "lady up," and that's bold. It's almost confrontational. So where did that come from, and what does that phrase actually mean to you?
Lady up, yeah, like it's a softer version of that man up, but so it's not a super dominant feminist type movement. I love men. I think we need good, strong men in our culture, and so it's not at all trying to root men out of the boardroom or anything like that. It's more of in the female psyche and in our female challenges that we face. It's more of that lady up. For me, it means grow up in your faith. For me, it means let's get off the milk and let's get on the meat. Let's lean in to God. Let's let him order our steps. Let's let him guide us. Because at this point, I really believe the only way we influence, the only way that we get ahead, any of that, is when we're walking out that fruit of the Spirit. And the only way that that's developed is when we are whole and healthy and healed on the inside. We're not wounded warriors out here, offended by everything, you know, just so thrown off our game by everything. Like, we need to be very, very solid. And there are a lot of women that can fake that. Again, I've worked with many of them. You can fake it for a little while, but if it's not authentic, if it's not really a part of who you are, like if God's really not got a hold of you and he's not the Lord of your life, then, you know, your mask is going to slip at some point. And when it does, it's usually pretty ugly. It's usually pretty embarrassing. So, lady up just means grow up in your faith to me.
Well, in 2020, you ran for Tennessee State House, and you didn't win, but you've said it changed everything. So what did losing teach you that winning might not have ever taught you?
You remember that book, Jason Failing Forward? You know,
Yeah.
it's a great book. Like, I don't believe there's any such thing as losing or failing. I think you're either winning or you're learning. And that race, again, God called me to that after my brother passed, and it took me a year to agree to kind of cooperate with God and go in. And then once I pulled my papers and I was going to run and put my name on that ballot, the night before I was going to turn it in, I was just tossing and turning all night, sick to my stomach all night. And I got up the next morning and I called this coach that I'd been working with, Grace. She'd been helping me make the decision. And she said, Diane, what is your problem? You know, we've been working on this for a year. You know, this is what God's called you to do. And I said, Grace, I just feel like I'm going into the lion's den. And she literally like busted out laughing. She goes, oh, you are going into the lion's den. She said, but let me ask you this. She goes, how did that work out for Daniel? And when she said that, I just stopped in my tracks and I said, you're absolutely right. And that's when I went all in. So going all in, and that was in 2020. That was when COVID broke out. That was when all the BLM riots were breaking out. I mean, it was like the most tumultuous time to ever run for office, and especially when you're a newbie. At the end of that, it cost me so many things. It cost me friendships. It cost me relationship with my adult son. There was such a significant cost to that race. And so at the end of it, I was really a little mad, and I went to God in prayer. I'm like, why did you put me through that? if it wasn't to win, and I came in very, very, very close, like all night on election night, my opponent and I were neck and neck, and he was the Goliath. Like I literally raised 10% of what he had in his coffers. And yet we were neck and neck all night long in a very split district. But the mail-in ballots came in and put him over. And so I finished at 46%. Um, I just licked my wounds for a little while, and I'm like, Lord, what was the point? And that's when he started really working on my heart. He showed me that that was a stepping stone toward the work that I'm doing now. So one of the things that I always say when I'm consulting someone or mentoring someone is that God wastes nothing. All of it is a part of his purpose. So it may look like a colossal failure or an embarrassment, or even if it's a worst case scenario, there's always life on the other side of that when we're in faith, and God uses it all for good. So I wouldn't trade that for anything, because now I have so much more connection and understanding of the cultural issues. And now I can guide women and guide people through that with the messaging and with the conversations and all that, the work that I'm doing now.
Well, I want to talk about how you're doing that, guiding women with the training workshops that are reaching thousands of women in the battleground states. But before I ask that question, I want to circle back to something that sounds like it was a really large cost. And you said that that race cost you a relationship with your adult son. Would you
Yeah.
care to kind of dig into that a little bit? Because I think I'm interested to know what that means.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was very determined to help veterans when I entered that race. That was all I wanted to do, was help veterans. But of course, when you put your name on the ballot, you have to go on record about everything else you believe. And I had never really stopped to think about it. I'd never stopped to think, how do I feel about abortion? How do I feel about, Second Amendment? So I started studying. I'm one of these people, I go inch wide, mile deep whenever I do anything. And so I had a binder like this thick, studying, and trying to get different perspectives, the same approach that I took when I was a consultant. So I thought that I had been pretty responsible in delivering my platform, and I felt very connected and very solid in my faith in delivering that. When I started publicly speaking about my stand on these issues, again, a lot of friends, family started coming against me, but then my adult son started posting on Facebook, started being very vicious on Facebook. And I had no idea we were so far apart on these issues. He and I had never talked about politics. I just had no idea that he felt so differently. And I saw that the indoctrination from the schools and things like that had played a big, big role. Certain people that he was around at the time, I think, were influencing him a lot. But we were struggling, and he kept on posting on Facebook. And so I finally reprimanded him like a mom, like a good Southern mom. I called him and I said, look, you can disagree, and I don't mind if you have a different opinion, but this doesn't need to be playing out on Facebook. Like, you need to call me directly and talk to me about it. We talk privately, because when you're running for office and your opponent is watching everything you're doing, they see blood in the water if your own family starts to fall apart in the middle of that. And so not only was he hurting me like personally, but it could also cost me the race. So I was furious with him. And I'm a Christian, but I'm going to tell you, I was so mad. I did drop a word that I wish I wouldn't have said, but it offended him so bad that I reprimanded him like that he canceled me from his life. And we've had a couple of interactions since then. I flew up. He lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he's married now. Has had a child. My granddaughter is just turned 3. I have yet to meet her. He tells me that my conservative Christian worldview is toxic, and he believes he's trying to protect his family. I flew up there and invited him to a cafe, and we sat and talked for a couple of hours, and we've started to make our way back, but it's going to be a long road back. He's very, very guarded. So
I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I know that there's lots of listeners that have dealt with similar uncomfortable and devastating family breakdowns around stupid stuff like politics and this type of thing. So I'm really sorry that you've had to deal with that, but it sounds like that in spite of that, you've continued to do these training workshops that are helping a lot of women, thousands of women. And what you are referring to specifically is battleground states. I would say the question I have about that is, What's the single biggest mindset shift that you see happen when a woman goes through your program?
The biggest mind shift is that they don't have to convince people or convert people. They instead learn how to attract people to our worldview. So I think a lot of women feel pressure because they feel fearful for their own children and their grandchildren. They feel fearful that if they don't come on strong with their friends and family about their beliefs, that, that things won't change. Or the other thing I see is they completely opt out of the conversations. They just chicken out. They don't want to have these tough confrontational conversations. So with my approach, they learn how to actually attract people to want to talk about it. And then secondly, how to influence without the confrontation. So that's what they take away. Yeah.
All right. We're going to get back to Diane in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to talk about something. If you're an entrepreneur, and I assume that you are because you're listening to this show, and you're ever thinking about exiting your business, I want you to consider, what do you need to fix before you exit? Because a lot of times we don't think about that until we get all the way to the end, and it's sometimes too late. So if you want to come to a free training that I host on your time, you can see it almost any time of the day. All you got to do is go to whattofixbeforeyouexit.com. That's whattofixbeforeyouexit.com. Sign up. It's a 1-hour free training on the 7 things that you need to take a look at in your business to fix today, so that when you're ready to exit later, it's going to be a much easier process. Now, before we get back to Diane, I want to share something that's changed the way I think about business cash flow and about building wealth. And this is our sponsor for today's episode. It's called Bank on Yourself. It's a strategy that lets you create your own private source of funding without having to rely on banks, because don't we just love banks? Actually, we don't. But without having to rely on banks, without relying on gatekeepers or tedious loan applications, or having your credit run every time you need to borrow money for something. And inside this opportunity, your money grows every single year. You have liquidity when you need it. You're protected from market volatility, and you set your own terms for borrowing and for repayment. And entrepreneurs all across the country are using this method of Bank on Yourself to control their financial future. Now, if you want to learn, you've probably heard a little bit about it everywhere on TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, that people talking about this. But if you really want to learn how to do it, you want to meet with somebody who can walk you through it, all you need to do is set up a meeting at therealjasonduncan.com/bankonyourself. That's therealjasonduncan.com/bankonyourself. And you can book a confidential session with a specialist who can show you exactly how this might fit your goals. So go to therealjasonduncan.com/bankonyourself. Now back to the show. Diane, you're a frequent panelist on Newsmax, News Nation, and Scripps News. How do you stay anchored in your message when you're surrounded by people who want to pull you into outrage and sound bites and clickbait?
Well, I mean, thank God I teach a whole program around how to avoid that. So that helps. The last 4 years or so, I've been building this program that it's really been training me too. I had a lot of these same skill sets when I did consulting work. And, I worked with a lot of companies, a lot of entrepreneurs that were in crisis. They're in complete freak out. So my job was to be the stable, steady one that could hold their hand through it. And so again, God's just been developing this in me for a long time. And same thing too in the music industry, doing television and shows for many years. You've got all kinds of people that try to, the haters and all kinds of people that try to pull you in, and then going through the political campaign. So I think I'm good and seasoned now for the news stations. One thing that is nice is it's nice to be on the friendly networks. The hostile ones, I just don't know if I'm going to do them anymore, Jason. I'll tell you, I did them a lot through the presidential campaign and even through the midterms, but I just don't know if I want to do it anymore. It's like, it's one of those things. Is it really helping anybody for me to go on and be the conservative punching bag on the hostile networks? I don't know. I think most of those people, the base that's watching that, really didn't care what I have to say. So maybe I just won't bother anymore. But going on like news, even News Nation can be pretty good. I flew up to New York and sat with Dan on his show, and that was fun. And, there was a lot of, moderates and stuff on that panel, but I really like going on Newsmax. We've got, especially the anchors. I love Sarah and TW Shannon. I love being on with them because we just laugh. We have a good time. I mean, I think if you don't laugh, you'll cry at a lot of what's going on in the news these days. So it's fun to be on with people who can, yes, we have serious issues, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I don't end up being like I said, the conservative punching bag.
Well, let's talk about something that's a little easier to talk about. Your third book, Lady Up in These Last Days.
Yeah.
It's going to be releasing this spring. So what shifted in your thinking that made you feel like this book had to be written right now?
Observing what's going on in our culture, being so immersed in it right now, and having such a strong, now immersive faith, so much more so. I'd say the last 3 years has been a serious growth spurt for me in my faith. It's very hard to deny when you look at both the culture and the faith aspects that we are in the last days. I mean, it couldn't be more glaringly obvious. Jesus said we would never know the date or the time. And of course, we don't want to set dates or anything like that, but he said you would know the season. And I think with AI coming on so strong, so many things in our culture that are aligned, I think we're in those last days. And so shifting now to everything that I've learned and experienced, shifting now into keeping the main thing, which is what does all of this matter when it comes to eternity? And how can I, maybe it has something to do with being more middle-aged now. I'm 55. I don't know. But I think now when I start to think about going into that throne room of God, I don't want to ever, I don't want anyone that I know or love to not have that experience. I'll tell you this quick story that really got me thinking about it. I heard somebody talk about how she had a dream. And she said in this dream, she was in the throne room of heaven. She had obviously died and she was waiting in line. And she said 2 or 3 people behind her, she saw someone that she knew and she just acknowledged her. Well, she gets up to, the girl having the dream gets up to the throne room and God looks at her and says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And she's like, "Oh, love you, God. I'm so glad to be here." And he says, "Why don't you do me a favor? Why don't you sit over here beside me before you leave?" And the next few people came up in line and passed on through. And then her friend comes up to the throne and God looks at her and says, "Away from me, I never knew you." And her friend looked at her with this panic in her eyes, like, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" And she said she woke up in a sweat and she said she made a decision right then that she would make it her goal to tell everyone. And yes, we are witnesses. Yes, we are disciples, all of that, ambassadors for God. But in these last days, which I'm convinced we're in, I just really want that to be a focus now and try and take as many people with us as we can when he comes. Yeah. All this political stuff, cultural stuff, even business stuff, it's all temporary. Our lives are a vapor. So how do we really keep focused on something eternal with all of this? We don't throw all that away. We're not like disconnecting from any of that, but how do we blend it all into a bigger purpose? So that's kind of what the book's about.
Well, and I think everybody needs to go take a look at that. That's Lady Up in These Last Days, going to be coming out probably within a couple months after the
release of the show. My goal is by March. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're right around the corner. This show is called The Root of All Success. So I've got some signature questions to ask every guest. And the first one is, what's your one key to success that you think has unlocked success for you more than anything else?
Favor of God, no doubt. Things I could not have possibly orchestrated.
How do you personally define the word success?
Peace. Being able to do, being right in the center of God's will. And whether I'm making a lot of money or not, that's no longer my measuring stick. It's that peace and that ability to know that I'm doing what he has put me here to do.
Based on that definition of success, Diane, do you consider yourself successful?
Oh, wildly. Wildly.
Okay, as we get ready to close out the show, I have a few rapid fire questions for you, Diane. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay.
All right. One book other than the Bible, you can't say that one, but one book other than the Bible that shaped your faith and your leadership the most.
Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Next one. If you could sit down with any woman from history, and you
Mm-hmm.
could sit down with her for an hour, who would you choose?
Wow. Any woman from history. I know this is rapid fire. I'm getting a little stuck. Maybe, oh my gosh, that's hard. Maybe Margaret Thatcher. She's coming first of mine, top of
Interesting.
mind. Yeah.
Very interesting. All right. All right. Last one. What's one thing most people would never guess about you?
Uh, I can't dive. I jump off. I jump off abstract high dives all the time, but I can't dive into a pool. I'm too chicken.
Uh,
Something about going head first physically hurts my heart more than going head first mentally and emotionally like I do all the time.
well, Diane, congratulations on your success. Congratulations on what you've built.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best as you move forward, not only in all the other things that you're doing, but specifically in that relationship with your son, because I know that is a pain that you have not yet totally revealed publicly because you're handling it really well. But I wish you the best in that because I know how important that is to you. But thank you for sharing that and talking about the loss of your brother and what you've been able to build in spite of that and because of that. And so thank you for the difference you're making in the world. So if people are impressed with your story and they're, you know what, I want to reach out and talk to this lady or at least get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, DianeCanada.com. And thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate your heart for saying that. And I'm praying every day for restoration, and not only for mine, but for everyone. It's epidemic in our country right now. There are a lot of people listening that have walked that walk too. And so I pray over all of us for restoration with those we've lost like this in this political climate. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Diane. So DianeCanada.com. Well, there you have it, folks. Another very successful person sharing her story of what she's done to become successful. And I'm grateful that she was here on the show today to talk about this and to share that perspective and what she's done. And you know what? Maybe God is calling you into the classroom. Maybe he's calling you to a foreign field. Maybe he's calling you into politics. Let's hope not. I'm just kidding. But maybe he's calling you into something that you need to go into. So be sensitive to that, because the success that we all seek, as she said, was peace, can really only happen when we are in that quiet spot and really know that we're doing and being who we are supposed to be and what we are supposed to do. So lean into it and go listen to shows like this and follow Diane and go check her out. But big thanks to her and her team for making this happen today. And thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, whoever you are, wherever you are, for listening to the show. Until next time, I am the real Jason Duncan. And as always, Jesus is King. We'll see you next time.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.